if he needs to post the link in it.
Phone's going out.
Are we on the live still though? Because she's not posted the link.
It's still going. I can just use that camera and have that as the thing.
Okay, do that.
Good evening, welcome. Am I on? Am I on? Hello and welcome to our event this evening. My name is Catherine Bryan, I'm Data Science Director here at the Co-op. That sounds awful. Am I standing too close? Thank you. Let me just start with a few bits of health and safety and admin. We're not expecting a fire alarm today, so if the fire alarm does go off, you can follow me because I'll be out first. The fire room meeting place is out the door by the Printworks, so head out round the corner to the left and then off to the right. Fire escapes are at either end of the building. If you need a toilet, the gents is here, ladies is at the other end. Could I ask everybody to please put their phones onto silent? Seating, I think as you should know, parts of this event are being videoed. If you would prefer not to feature, the area in the top left as I'm looking at it will be out of shot. So please make your way that way, and if we need to make space, if there's anybody currently sitting there who is happy to be filmed, please do a swap to accommodate. What we're going to be doing this evening is, I'm first of all going to introduce our keynote speaker. We're going to have a panel discussion. What I'm going to do is save time for questions until the end. There will be plenty of time for questions, and then we'll move into workshops. There will be lots of refreshments as we go through. Could I please ask you to keep hold of the handouts you've been given? You'll see there's some coloured stickers on that. Those are important because they'll guide which workshop we should be going to. There's still feedback on here, isn't there? I think that's it for the logistics. So, let me just give 2 minutes on why we're here and why we heard this event. Data. It's a pretty broad topic. It means different things to different people. So what do we actually mean by data? Well, data, from my point of view, is all kinds of information. And in today's world, it's no longer just the raw data of digital tables holding people's names, addresses, etc. In today's economy, data is photos that you're uploading, it is social media feeds that's going, it is information as commuters move around town that's capturing as you move through tube stops, for example. And data is being used more and more in all sorts of different situations. The Economist ran a big article a few weeks ago on data, and they showed a graph which showed in the last 2 years there's been an 8-fold increase in the number of companies that have referenced artificial intelligence in their earnings commentary in the last 2 years. So data is pervasive. With it comes huge opportunities. I'm sure most of us in this room benefit and get tremendous value from how organisations are using our data every day. But it also comes with massive challenges, privacy, security, and also who benefits from the use of the data. There's a lot of talk about how the data economy at the moment is extractive. Few organisations take the majority of the benefit. We, of course, are a cooperative. We're privileged to hold quite a lot of data on our members. We're privileged that some of those members give us permission to use it in some respects. We want to be using data in a way that can help great things happen for our members and for our communities. The world has changed a lot in the last few years, and we're now taking the opportunity to say, you know what, we need to totally revisit and rethink what our policies are around what data we have on our members, what we do with it, how we use it, why. And today is the start of a journey. What we want to do is we want to listen to our members, we want to listen to our stakeholders and understand how should we be thinking about that. So thank you for joining us, thank you for contributing, and we look forward to starting the conversation. With that, I'm delighted to welcome Jenny Tennyson, who's going to give us a keynote speech. Jenny is, in fact, I'll let Jenny introduce herself. Thank you.
Thank you. Hopefully if I stand here, won't be feedback. So, I'm Jenny Tennyson. I'm a member of the Co-op's Digital Advisory Board, and I'm also the CEO of the Open Data Institute. I can see some of you have picked up our bump near the front. We're a small not-for-profit who work particularly with companies and governments to try and get data to flow more easily to the people that need it. And one way of putting that is that we want to create a strong, a fair and a sustainable data economy, and we're really at the start of the journey of working out how to do that. So I'm going to be talking particularly about openness and building trust in the way in which data gets used, with a particular focus on the use of data within a retail setting. I'm going to talk about how retailers use data currently, or how they could use data, the kinds of controls that people have over the use of data, and some of the challenges around that, and then some ideas and provocations about how organisations can build trust in the use of people's data. So first of all, something about, a bit of background about what kind of data we're talking about here. I think we can break down the kind of data that retailers have about us into three main areas. So first of all, there's the data that we provide to organisations explicitly when we fill in forms, things about our name and our address, our date of birth, those kinds of things. Anything that we get explicitly asked for. Then there's data that just gets created through our activities that an organisation can monitor, a retailer can see. So for example, what we buy and where we buy it, that's based on the activities that we do. And very often then organisations will take those two sources of data and match it up with data that comes from outside the organisation, from elsewhere, and create new kinds of information about us, so, which I'd characterise as data that they guess about us, right? Data that gives a label to the kind of person that we are, and that they might then use in order to determine what they do with us, how they interact with us. So it's worth bearing in mind that the data that in each of these cases can be more or less accurate and more or less fuzzy. So for example, some people, when they provide data, will lie about, say, their date of birth, because they don't want to be tracked and they don't want to have that information used against them in some way. Data that gets generated, well, when I go into my nearby co-op and I buy my food, then sometimes I forget to show my membership card, right? So they don't know everything that I buy. So that data that gets generated might not be accurate about all of my spending habits. And then the data that people guess about us, the labels that they apply to us, of course there's fuzziness around that, more or less accuracy. How does that get used? Well, that data that's about you can be used in lots of different ways. It can be used to advertise to you, to provide you with special offers, to give you a personalised service. In some places, then, so for example, in insurance, data about us gets used in order to adjust pricing. Data can get shared with other organisations to give useful analytics back to the organisation that holds it. It can even be sold to create some revenue. It can be used internally to improve products and services, to identify efficiencies and better ways of working and provide insights about people. And it can also be used externally, and this is something I'll come back to. By sharing data more widely, it can also be used to benefit society as a whole. So the way in which data gets, there's a whole range of different ways in which data gets used. All of them kind of come back, you could argue, to benefit us as individuals, but the focus of them is either on the individual or on the organisation operating more effectively, or actually on society as a whole operating more effectively. And some of the choices that organisations need to make is which of these to do and the degree to which to do them. What about control? What kind of control do we have over the way in which our data is used? So everyone has rights over data that is held about them under the current Data Protection Act, and you will have even more rights under a new set of regulations that will be coming in next year, the General Data Protection Regulations. These give you extra rights, for example, the right to access data that is held about you, including being able to access that so that you can pass it on to another organisation who can do things with it for you. So examples being for taking your list of your favourite shopping, the stuff that you really like to buy, and taking that to another retailer so that you can more easily buy things from them instead. Another right that you have will be a right to delete any data that is held about you. And there's a whole bunch of these other kinds of rights. And within those regulations, then you also have this right to be able to give consent, to have to give consent about the way in which data is used. If you give permission, if you say, yes, you can use data in this way, then an organisation can use it in that way. Now, consent is a difficult area because even when we give consent for data to be used, it's often not particularly meaningful consent, as in do we have a real choice? And often it's not really informed consent, as in we don't know all of the implications about giving that consent or the way in which that data could be used. And different people have different kinds of feelings about the way in which they'd like their data to be used. But giving individuals very granular consent can be a challenge. It can be hard to implement that within just technically, it can be hard to implement. It can be hard to keep up to date. So if you in many organisations, you'll be trying to find different ways of using data to get different kinds of insight, to develop different kinds of products, and things change all the time. Does that mean that you have to keep all of your consent options changing all the time, with people constantly being prompted to change their privacy settings, right? So granular consent can be hard to keep up to date. Granular consent, it can also be really overwhelming with users. When you have like 50 different options that you could say yes or no to about the way in which your data is used, they become really confusing. So for me, so what we end up with is, because of those problems, what we often end up with is one big long terms and conditions that basically says, yes, you can do anything that you want with this data, and you tick the consent box because you want to have access to the service, and that's it. So consent is a difficult area. It's not an easy one to address, and I think it's one that we need to be working on, and I know that people on the panel have some other ideas about that too. So to go on to my final points, shall I try and move it? How can organisations build trust? Well, first of all, it's really important to have some good security guarantees. Security is a hygiene factor. If you don't have security around data, then people are not going to trust you with it, quite rightly. The next issue, the next thing I think organisations need to do is be really clear in communicating how data is being used, not in little small print at the bottom of your terms and conditions, but writing, really helping to guide people through understanding what it is that is being done with their data. Some things that I would highlight around that is this work from Understanding Patient Data, who came up with this visual way of describing the way in which data can be anonymised to different degrees. So a very clear picture indicating where data is personally identifiable. You can really see who that person is. This kind of slightly fuzzy picture showing depersonalised data, so that's where you can't see exactly who that person is, but you can roughly make out that they're a woman, they're wearing glasses, that kind of thing. And then anonymous data where you aggregate information together such that we know that there's 50% roughly of women in the audience, for example, and that in itself is giving us some information, but it isn't saying anything about one person or another. Another communication aid that we find useful at the Open Data Institute is this data spectrum, which focuses on different types of access to data. So on the left, looking at closed data, that's data that is only held within a particular organisation. Shared data, which gets shared to particular organisations or groups, or is available generally on the web, but with terms and conditions around it that mean that you can't do anything that you want with it. And then open data, where open data is data that anyone can access and use and share in any way. So finding new ways of communicating to people about different kinds of different forms of data and different ways in which data is being used, I think is really important. It is also important to provide some controls, which I would term negative controls, controls that give people the control over what not should be done with their data. So to limit what is done with data that is about you. But I also think it's really important that we look at positive controls. So how do we help people to take their data and get the most benefit for themselves out of it? That might mean sharing it with some other analytics service or transferring it to another organisation, but really putting you back in control with that data. Some people when we talk about medical data, for example, want to be able to take their health records and donate them for medical research because they know that that data will be useful for medical research. We should have the rights to be able to choose to do those positive things with data that is about us. One challenge that I think is really interesting for the co-op and for us here is how can we take the data that is being collected about us and use that to give back to and benefit the communities that we operate in. So we are used to, as being co-op members, that we get some benefit back ourselves from being members, but we also give benefit to the communities that we exist in through the payback scheme. So what does that look like for data? We might get benefit back ourselves as individuals, but is there a benefit that we can give to our communities too with the data that co-op has the privilege of having access to? And the final thing that I just wanted to highlight that I think is really important for organisations that want to grow trust in the way in which they use data is to engage and to talk about it. We have recently, I don't know if you've seen it on the news, had a big kerfuffle over the way in which DeepMind had access to a whole bunch of patient data. And one of the things that they did very poorly, DeepMind did very poorly, was not talk about what they were doing really up front. So that when it hit the papers, then it was a big story and it was a problematic story, and they're now it will be very difficult for them to be able to access that kind of data again. So engaging early to have the conversations, to see what people think, and to work out together what the right kinds of principles are, what works for this particular organisation and for this particular community is really important. And that's really why we're here today.
Thank you, Jenny. If you don't mind, I'm going to hold questions and we'll wait until after we've spoken with the panel before we Oh, we've got a few people off to the side. Should we just pause for a minute to allow people to move in? Come in, those that are tucked away. We did start amazingly promptly, so there are some spaces if you want to come in and sit down in your chair as well. Brilliant. Thank you and welcome to the newcomers who've just joined us. I'm now absolutely delighted to welcome the rest of our panel. I won't do them justice, so what I'm going to suggest is we'll start with Jenny, but then just allow everybody to introduce themselves, tell you who they are, which organisations they're from, what they do, and perhaps to leave you with one key message. If you only take one thing away from today, I'll ask them to sort of give one message. So, can I introduce myself? Very good. Ryan.
Hi, my name's Ryan Garner. I work for a company called Citizen.me. Citizen.me provide an app to everyone, people like me and you, and the app allows you to take control of your personal information and decide what to do with it. So, for example, you could share that information with researchers, be it academic researchers or market researchers, for cash rewards. That data is anonymised, and you get a little bit of a kickback in terms of cash. You can also use the information within the app to understand a bit more about yourself. So, for example, you might think that you're doing lots of really great stuff to keep the environment green and everything, but what are your behaviours actually saying about that? So what's the difference between how you think you're behaving and how you're actually behaving? You can also have a look at how your personality traits come across on Facebook or Twitter, and how you indeed believe your personality to be, and compare that across the different channels. So it's an app for you, it's an app for you to take control of your information and exchange it with explicit consent with other businesses and organisations. In terms of the point that I'd like to take away from today, the economy we live in right now, the digital economy, it is a digital economy, and to make that work, we need to share our data. If we don't share information, the economy just won't work. But the problem that we're facing right now, and it's increasingly becoming more of a news headline, is that our personal information isn't being managed very well. It's concentrated in a few organisations. So for us to create personal value, societal value, and wider economic prosperity, we really need to think about how we manage data in our economy, in our society, so that everyone involved gets a fair and equal return on that. The other thing that really is not quite clear is what value can we get from our information? Because everything we do online, whether it's just switching on your phone or looking on YouTube, or cats skating on skateboards, all that's data. And what does that mean to us? It doesn't really mean very much to us in its raw format, but actually it can tell us quite a lot about who we are and how we fit into the world. And I think that type of value is not necessarily available to people right now, and I think it's something that we really need to explore because it has huge societal impact and huge personal impact. So data to some people might seem quite boring, but I think it's quite exciting.
Hello, my name is Sarah Gold. I'm a designer. I also direct a studio called IF. We help teams to make services that people trust. So we're very interested in privacy, security, accountability. We work with teams to build services that empower people. That means services that put people in greater control of data and help companies to see the positives for being more accountable for how they use it. We're also looking into how you can design and develop better consent models that aren't just terms and conditions, like Jenny said, that are longer than War and Peace and written in gobbledygook. And we're also trying to make digital rights a mainstream consumer issue. So with connected Internet of Things products or infrastructure like Wi-Fi, there are lots of factors in both of those things and many, many other areas that really are public safety and public policy issues. So we're helping to make that happen. The thing I'd like for you to take away is that I think the Co-op are in a unique position to explore what digital rights really mean, particularly for members. What do digital rights for cooperatives mean? And to help deliver that and to show it, to demonstrate it through the services that they provide you. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Jessie Baker. I'm from a company called Provenance. What we are, we essentially work with businesses to help them. Is that me? I don't know. I'll keep going. Sorry. We work with businesses to help them make their supply chains more transparent. So what does that mean? It means we're an app that businesses that make mostly food and drinks and sell them use our app to make their supply chains more transparent. So open up information about people.
Okay, I'll start again. Yes, so I'm Jessie from Provenance. We're an app for businesses that make and sell stuff to be more transparent about how they made that stuff, where and from what. So we enable people to open up data about where products come from, essentially. Yeah, so I guess I'm here for a slightly different perspective. I'm really excited about transparency being a two-way thing, I guess. Not just about Co-op members sharing more data and what that can enable the Co-op to do in terms of delivering better services, which is really exciting, but also about the power that members have to get the Co-op to open up information as well. Like, where are they buying all their meat from and where are the vegetables grown? I think it's a two-way thing, and I think that can create a really exciting engine for change, for more sustainable behaviour, and for better quality products and services that we all want.
Hi everyone, I'm David Leach from Peak. We're a data analytics as a service business, so again coming from a slightly different perspective, but we help our customers to improve their business performance by using their data to help them become more effective. We've built a platform that takes data from multiple sources, so any data source gets it into shape, and then we've got a series of algorithms and a team of data scientists that help to solve business problems that can really add value to our business. In terms of what I think takeaways would be, I think I'd probably echo around the unique position that the Co-op is in terms of the number of touch points that the Co-op has with members through all different stages of the life cycle, I suppose. And as a member and a former employee as well, I'm quite excited to see where we can take this.
Brilliant. Thank you. I think I'll just shout loud, if that's okay. That might be easier. I'm just going to seed a couple of questions and perhaps invite the panel to have a discussion. And then once we've done that, we'll stop asking you to listen and give you a chance to input, given that that's what we're here for ultimately. So, first question I'll see is, we've talked a lot about the fact that there's a lot of value inherent in data. Could you talk a little bit about what you think that value is and where you see that going? Ryan, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Excuse me. So, I guess the value from data that we all see probably in this room right now is free services online. So, those services from Google or Facebook or Instagram or whatever digital services you use, they are data companies, and you're exchanging your information, and in return you're getting free services. And that has been great because it's enabled us to do lots of new things that we've not been able to do in the past. Value goes beyond free services, however, and value can be as small as understanding little bits of information about yourself you didn't quite know. Like, for example, did you know that you are more happy that when you exercise more, for example? It might be a little bit of insight that might inspire you to be a bit more healthy. To bigger things like what Jenny was talking about in her keynote, about donating some of your information for big medical projects that are going to have a wider impact on society. This is value from data that we don't quite see and recognise right now because it's not obvious to us. It's not really talked about in the mainstream news. And what I said in my introduction is that the value from personal data we need to spend more time talking about this because it has huge value in lots of different areas. Between you and the co-op, there's potentially lots of value and benefits you can get from sharing information. And the two-way thing was a really great point. You know, your impact on co-op is: are you going to spend your money with them? Yes, you're going to spend your money with them if the supply chain's great, and that is a vote of your preference. But it's also you sharing information as well. It's you saying that this is my preference on this issue, and I'm going to vote with my money on this. I'm going to vote with my wallet. And so value comes in lots of different forms, and it depends on the different relationships you have with different businesses and different parts of society to determine where that value is.
Would you like to build on that?
Well, I'll just shout. I think briefly, to compete in the data economy that we've all been talking about, it's essential to draw on as much of the insight you can get from your data. The world's moved on. In order to succeed and compete, it's one of the things that every business needs to do. It's one of the reasons that we exist, to try and give people access to the advanced analytics side of things. So yeah, really sort of monetary value of actually getting insight from your data and taking action from the insight that you get.
I think value's quite hard to pin down because I think value for individuals can sometimes make new metrics that cause new problems. So you start looking at the wrong data sets. You can get obsessive about things that maybe aren't what you intended to do. And that's both for you as an individual, but also maybe as an employee or an employer. And so I think value is, for me, at the moment, thinking about collective value of information to improve the places where we live and work. And that feels really critical right now, particularly medical research, as Jenny said, is one of the areas where I think if we knew the benefits that sharing our medical information, where that went and contributed to, that would really encourage us, as long as it was done in a secure and controlled way, would give us more confidence about sharing more. So if you went into a hospital and were able to agree that any data you generated would go to improve that hospital, I think many of us would say, yeah, I'd do that. But we're not given that option right now. It doesn't exist, really. And I think that the value piece, particularly for much of the transparent information, is really untapped and really big, particularly to hold organisations to account. I'm also interested in the new kinds of groups or institutions or member-elected boards that we'll need to see that will be able to process that information, because I think that life is really busy for a lot of people. It's only going to get busier, and I don't expect many of us to be looking at logs of information about organisations. So who will be the groups we will trust to make decisions on our behalf, and perhaps produce new services from that transparent information? Which means, I think,
So for me, then the value of data is that it enables us to make more informed decisions. And I think that if we make more informed decisions, those decisions are better, and I think that we can come to conclusions, come to decisions more rapidly. So it is both that we have better quality ones and that we get to decisions quicker. And I think that applies whether it's a value for us as individuals, like how am I going to spend my spare time, or and to businesses, where am I going to invest? And I think it applies to policymakers at a government level, like how are we going to have provision? What's the population change going to look like, and how are we going to respond to that, right? So at every level of society, people are needing to make decisions, and data can help to inform those decisions. That doesn't mean that everybody opens up Excel spreadsheets and stares at their data. It means that there's a whole set of value that we actually get from a bunch of really cool technologies and applications and intermediaries that translate the raw information that we get, the raw data that we get, into insight that we can actually act on, and so that we can make those more informed, better decisions more rapidly. And I would echo Sarah's point about what that means is that we need to be really, really careful about what data we rely on, and really thoughtful about whether we are choosing the right things to measure, the right things to track. Because if we are basing our decisions off the wrong information and not having that nuance that we might need to have, then we are more likely to make poor decisions rather than better.
No, I completely agree with all the points. For me, the intermediary thing was really interesting, because I think we're not all going to look at all this data that we're sharing and see if we're happy with where it went. And perhaps there is some amazing, I've caused some great impact through sharing some data, but we don't have time to do all of that stuff all the time. And I think at the moment, the data intermediaries are all mostly for-profit entities trying to make money off of that data. And I think we need to really think carefully about who we're kind of entrusting our data with in between us and who's providing us the service, I think.
Can I add to that? I think what encourages me most at the minute is I see businesses being built to help people buy instead of just helping businesses sell. Typically, there's lots of services out there that help businesses sell stuff to you, but there's not very many businesses that help you buy. And I think there's some really great stuff happening right now that's linking personal information. So it's not asking you to look at any spreadsheets, it's just asking for your consent and your trust to use some of your personal information, potentially match it to some open data to help you buy some energy, and to help you better manage your bills and to better switch services. Because a lot of the switching services out there, they provide some value to us as consumers, but they're really working on behalf of the energy companies or the broadband companies or whoever you're switching with. But these new services, powered by personal data, powered by open data, are going to add huge value to us as consumers in the market.
Yeah, I think that's true. It comes down to a really tricky design problem though as well. Like the user interfaces for these things are hard. They're hard problems, and I argue probably the most important problems for us right now. It's critical. Like there's the open banking standard that I know the Open Data Institute are very involved with, and even the General Data Protection Regulation. These things are only going to empower us if we've got services and well-designed services that let you port data from, say, one supermarket to another automatically in a way that makes sense, because one supermarket can't deliver my shopping by tonight, but this one can, so I want to move my shopping across. At the moment, we're looking at a reality where you may just be given a CSV file that you've got to find somewhere deep in the settings. So for me, a lot of this comes down really to design.
Let me ask a second question then. There's obviously downfalls to sharing data, there's risks to sharing data, and actually from a personal preference perspective, I may have very different perspectives around what I'm willing to share and willing for my data to be used to the next person. So how can we, A, give people the control over how their data is being used, and do so in a way that we're building trust? Jenny.
Oh, thank you. Well, I spoke in my keynote. I think it's really important to distinguish between positive control and negative control. So the control that we have to stop data being used in ways we don't like, versus the control that we have to enable data to be used in the way we like. And one of my colleagues sometimes says he is not so worried about the bad things that could happen with data that he has, personal data that he has, but rather that he's missing out on the good things that could be done with it, because he's not able to get hold of it, not able to use it in more flexible ways. And I think it's important when we talk about, so I'm not really answering your question, I just think it's really important when we talk about barriers or fears, that we also think about the flip side of that, which is actually, in some ways, the fear of missing out, right? The fear of not being able to use data in flexible ways.
I think there's some really quite boring architectural, technological stuff that you can do and to try and make data more secure, but no one cares about that stuff. You just want to know that it's happening. And so for me, to show that, to build trust, there needs to be some kind of independent body that gives a stamp of authority to say, what this business has done here with your personal information is gold standard. Don't worry about it. We've audited it, and what they're doing is brilliant. This business over here, it's a bit like those food ratings you get where it's traffic light, red, orange, green, and you know that this red thing I'm about to eat is going to be really bad for my body, so I better go buy an apple. But you need something like that with data, and I think that will help and empower us as consumers to say, actually, I'm not going to go with this, I'm going to spend an extra 50p over here because it's good for me. That's the kind of thing that we need. We don't need lots of technical jargon to say this is all being managed well.
Do you think people are even aware of the spectrum yet? I kind of feel like, or science or something. Yeah, well, like, it's just a tick box at the moment. I think we've got quite a journey, a design journey to go on before we go from, I'm just trying to sign up for the service, tick, 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 to I'm going to think about these ticks. Because it's like, at the moment, it's like one line, like terms and conditions or whatever, it's like, it's not even apparent that it's like a huge Bible inside there of stuff. So it's kind of, I think there's a big design challenge to try and even make people think for a second longer about this when they're signing up to something.
But then we had the same design issues, I'd imagine, with things like fair trade.
Totally agree,
you know, to overcome those design issues, they're huge design issues, and they create huge and beneficial consumer change in the world. But
the opportunity to help.
Great opportunity.
Sarah, do you want to go?
So, I'm going to go back to your question because I'm kind of listening to the conversation, sort of forgotten it. So it was about to generate trust.
It was around what can we do in order to generate trust and give choice to people, given that we will all have different preferences and tolerances for how data is used.
So I think going back to, I'm going to do a cheeky Rob McKendrick plug, wherever he is. He wrote a blog post the other day and has his triangle of trust. Now, whether I agree it's a triangle of trust, I don't know. But I think actually his 3 topics were really great. He spoke about transparency, integrity, and consent. And I do think it's a combination of those things, which means about talking about what you're doing, being very open about that and the journey you're going on, because the GDPR throws grenades at all parts of an organisation. This is pretty tough, and no one's going to become just compliant overnight, partly because the regulation isn't even finished yet, but that besides the point. It's hard, it's quite tricky. Not impossible though. So I think taking people on that journey and being realistic is really important to be trusted. I think also being transparent in the right way, so giving transparency in context that's useful is really important. So you're not just having a place where you can go and find your data that really isn't going to mean very much to you, or find how that information is being used. I think this is about giving transparent information in context at point of use, where it meets a user need. And I think that comes back to trust will be about delivering really brilliant digital services that are well maintained, meet really solid research user needs, that you will really enjoy using because they'll be brilliant. And I think that's about how you build the trust. But to do that, you need to have really good digital rights embedded into those services and permissions and security.
Dave, final word before we open up to comments and questions.
I'll be brief. Relevant to what we do, sort of passing data to third parties, but for the right reasons. In terms of, like if there was like what we do, so outsourced data analytics that can help in a number of areas across a number of sectors. But in those terms and conditions, it needs that could set hairs running. Could pass data to third parties, etc. So it needs to be specific and clear what the reasons are for passing data to perhaps a third party. So you're 100% explicit, open, and honest at the point of signing up to some data terms and conditions.
Thank you very much. Right, thank you for being so patient and listening. Of course, the objective of today was to have a broad dialogue. So let me open up for comments and contributions and/or questions for our panelists. Yes, please.
Hi. Yeah, it was really interesting. Really interested to know from the panel whether they think cooperatives are an ideal structure for, I suppose, our personal information management services, what we're talking about, right? Because not only do you have an implied consent because people are owners of that organisation, and therefore their interests are being best represented by that organisation within that democratic structure, but also that data can collectively be used to represent people, rather than what you're getting at the moment is a very singular point-to-point transaction, whereas data can be used for ethical purposes, such as a certain piece of research, or won't be used for extractive industries or some things like that. Do you think that's a possibility?
Who would like to take that?
Yes, I think they're great forms of organisations to capitalise on that opportunity. A cooperative has to serve its members, and it has to serve the community that, or the community of members that belong to that cooperative as well. And so it's not just the direct relationship the member has with the business, but it's the wider piece as well. And so I think cooperatives are brilliant organisations to start this, and I'd love to see kind of more cooperative businesses entering that personal information management services, those services that help you buy stuff or help you do stuff, act on your behalf, a personal assistant for you, not for another business. And I think those organisation structures would be great for that.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
It's a really complex conundrum, and I'm going to try and make my point as succinct as possible by trying to take in, all the things that we've heard so far. We've heard about there's challenges around trust with users. We've heard about there's challenges about terms and conditions and the minutiae that you have to go to with all the different providers you have about how they manage their data. There's also an issue about choice as well. And we have a model that exists at the moment where we have organisations that are out there, and the consumer has to move to the organisation. And there's a chance of missing out on things because you go to the things that you're aware of and you miss out on things that you're not aware of. And you have to have an individual agreement with each of those organisations. And I wonder whether or not we miss a trick by not flipping the model on its head. So rather than individuals moving to organisations and the risk of spam and all the things that your inbox is filled with that you don't really want, and why don't we have a situation, or what would the chances of be, where we had personalised identity management, where we select our choices, we make our own terms and conditions, and actually organisations come to us based on the choices that we make. Because I can say instantly, I want my data for medical research, I don't want holiday information, I don't want this kind of information. And actually we filter providers that come to us based on our preferences, and it gets around this idea of, do I trust this organisation to manage my data correctly? Do I trust an individual organisation that might start off on the right foot, but over a period of time, their goals and objectives might change, and I've got to be watching out for all these notices that come up to tell me, by the way, we changed the terms and conditions, can you go through and read all the fine print and work out which tick box? And there's always that tricky one where you say, yes, 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 oh no. There's always that one that catches you, to try and catch you out. And I think if we're genuinely thinking about designing services for users, to make it easier for users, maybe it's making the choice at the user's end, and companies coming to us.
The company I work for, Citizen Me, is at the start of that process. What you just described is extremely complex and will take a long time to get there. And I agree. I've written stuff about how the internet should be based around people, not around organisations. From a purely personal perspective, it's really annoying when one of my mates joins a new social network that I have to go and download the app for to communicate to them. It's not how the world should work. And actually, it didn't work that way. If you think about how email works, we had this beautiful protocol, the SMTP protocol, which allowed me as a Gmail user to send an email to you as a Yahoo user, and the internet worked interoperably like that. And so I think we can get there. It's just that we have just moved to a world where everything's just a bit more siloed, and we're having to go to businesses, as you say, to get there. The terms and conditions piece is hard, really hard. But then again, there's hope with that. You look at legal examples of where things have been simplified, and the Creative Commons licenses is a fantastic example of where they've taken copyright law, which is enormously complicated, and made it really simple for people to create licenses, so people can understand how they can use that piece of work. And so I think the same kind of things can apply to personal information as well. But it's hard, and it's going to be a long road, unfortunately.
I'd also give a big plug to Sarah's blogs, because I think they have some of the most well articulated points of view on this.
Thank you.
Yes, Richard.
The co-op aspires to be trusted with data. The panel have got an enormous understanding of lots of different organisations, how they're using data. I wondered if anybody on the panel could think of an organisation that was trusted because of the way they currently use data. It's quite a niche topic for most consumers, most citizens. Are there any organisations that are known because of the way they use and collect and distribute personal data and are trusted because of that?
I think there's lots of negative examples.
Yes.
Yep.
But I don't know of any positive examples, which is why I think that a co-op is in an interesting position to be there.
Aren't we in a situation a bit where there's a real danger that for many people the horse is already bolted, and you've got commercial giants like Facebook and Google, who basically conned most of the planet with their free services. People didn't realise why they were free. And they're now locked in because there isn't really an alternative to those platforms, or those attempts to build alternatives are few and far between and much further down the curve. So they have complete market dominance. That's a comment. I suppose the question is, the Co-op is a large organisation. Is there something that the Co-op can do to try and do something about that? Because I think for many of us out here, we feel like we've been fleeced.
I feel really hopeful about that. I think that the Co-op is in a good position to, particularly for its members who are not young tech people from London, to build services that meet the needs of where the members are, which are smaller communities where you might have more local community services that are needed. But I'm also hopeful that those larger groups that you've just spoken about will change, because they're going to have to. If anything, from particularly their political power that we've seen play out, I think these companies will be regulated in some way or another, and probably be better for it, actually. I'm hopeful that those organisations will change. I think we'll always have Facebook and Google. I mean, they're blooming useful. They provide real utility for a lot of people, most of the planet. But I think there is space for other groups to emerge too. But I think that's where cooperatives, in particular, need to look at where there's a real need from people for services that are going to become big. Like you hear a lot about cooperative Uber or Airbnb. I don't think that these big monopolies have a monopoly on good ideas at all, and they shouldn't do. But I do think it's about meeting what people really need and building products around those needs. That's how those big companies have got so good. We've sort of forgotten that. We think the only way to make alternatives is to make the same thing but with a different model, and I'm not sure that's quite right.
Yes.
Thanks. I'm Jenny de Villiers, Member Council, and I'm also on the Co-op Way Policy Committee, which is reviewing all the policies within the cooperative group. And we are basing all those policies on our values and principles. None of you mentioned our values and principles. They are our foundation. We are a member-owned business, and we are here for the benefit of our members. And this, to me, today, sounds very top-down. The consultation with our members, I think, I'm not sure how much you've done, but I think, you've got a huge opportunity. You already have a member council, we already have a member base, and I'd be interested to know how you see yourselves actually engaging with that body, and also, in this digital world, how are you going to improve efficiencies, which is what a member wants to see as a benefit. It wants to see efficiencies within the society. It wants to see efficiencies if it's dealing with energy. How are those digital solutions, cooperative solutions, going to work?
Perhaps I should take that one. In terms of the engagement questions, today is the very first step in starting that engagement, which is why you and everybody else have been invited here. When we finish today, the consultation is not ended. In fact, it's hardly started. We will be reflecting on what we've learned here. We need to do loads more consultation with our members. We will be coming to the member council. We haven't worked out exactly when, how, etc. But rest assured that will be happening. We've not talked explicitly about the values because, to me, they go without saying. They're almost sort of through the fabric of everything that Co-op does, and therefore you didn't feel they needed to be explicitly called out, but they're, of course, all policies that Co-op has, as you said, have those infused through. And fundamentally, everything we do needs to be for the value of its members, as you say. Your second question question was slightly different actually, which was around efficiencies and how we're building those.
Within the society.
Within the society, yeah.
That's why we're here, isn't it, mainly?
Of course.
It's the social value and the economic value to our members. So how will you be adding to that efficiency?
There are, I'm hesitating only because there are many, many teams around the organisation for whom that is basically their day job that we're doing day in, day out. So I included in my team, for example, I have people that are looking at our membership proposition, how it's performing, how it could be improved, what's working, what's not working. Within our food business, there are many teams looking at operational efficiencies, how can we improve, learn. Most things that we do as an organisation, we need to be testing and learning. And we can get an awful lot better at that. And every week and every month, I think we've got a long way to go on that journey. But I'm interested that you asked that question because that implies that you've not had visibility of that, which is, and if that's the case, that is an easy one to rectify.
Join that picture.
Exactly.
We need
Yes.
to.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just wanted to touch on prior question. Someone mentioned about the issues with Facebook and has the horse already bolted? And we talked earlier about fair trade, and I think the issue around the conversation and narrative of data is, in terms of the public domain, it doesn't exist. And neither did the conversation and narrative around the concept of fair trade until fair trade existed and the co-op pioneered that. So I think there's something to talk about in terms of the pioneering of something that actually identifies good data and bad data policies that then can have some problem mark attached to it, like was mentioned here. I think perhaps maybe the co-op's got something to do there, where we could think about how to champion something that does something in a similar way to what we do with fair trade.
So one more question, yes.
Hi, I'm very poorly located here, that's what you can see. Luckily I've made friends with our cameraman, so it's made life a lot easier. Okay, right, basically, there are two core themes that I've seen coming across, and there's one about protecting data and there's one about sharing it. And so I've been thinking about this member data vaults idea. Imagine if we each had our own data vault and we could control who had access to it. Like with Snapchat, you can control how long people have access to your images. Imagine you could control how long they have access to your data. But the other side of that, of course, is where you're talking about how we can share data with the community. Could we see the co-op sharing data with, say, the Woodcraft folk? We've got data on when barbecue stuff is being bought. Could we tell them when to hold their events? So when we're looking at this balance, it just makes me wonder, is the ever-increasing sharing of our data inevitable? Really? So a bit of a long question there.
I think yes. Probably. I think your idea is brilliant, and I'm assuming what we're all here to discuss. I think the co-op could be a fantastic pioneer of our own personal data and holding vaults and having that link to co-op membership and pioneering a new standard for how we should trust that data. But that's we've got to go on a long journey to get there, right? And I think in the meantime, we've got to try and look at if there's little things that we can create links between co-op members and the co-op that can help make the efficiencies we're talking about, help everyone make better decisions. And so, yeah, I feel like we are going to keep sharing, and there's not a lot we can really do about that, and it's kind of how we live our lives online. But I think being aware of that, noting it, and I think this is an open forum here to try and think about how we can improve all of those interactions and how co-op can pioneer a better way.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for
Two questions from the live stream, if we may, real quickly.
Okay.
We've got a question from Adrian Short, which I think is best placed to you, Catherine. Okay. It is, should the co-op attempt to identify people who have a diminished capacity to give informed consent for how their data is collected and used? If so, how?
I think that's a brilliant question, and one that we need to consider the way to do that. I don't know what the answer is right now as to how, but I think that's a brilliant question.
And the other question is from John Nolan, which goes back to the keynote from Jenny. It said, Jenny seemed to suggest that companies who would be obliged to sorry, I'll start again. Jenny seemed to suggest that companies would be obliged to enable customers to extract and share collected data with other companies under the GDPR. Is this the understanding of the whole panel? It links back to the example that Jenny gave on shopping preferences.
Yeah, it is.
We're getting a lot of nods, John.
Portability.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everybody. Now, what we're going to do now, we would like to continue hearing many, many more of your views. We've got a